Hey, what's up? This is Stu Schaefer, and I'm about to explain how fat actually increases and affects your insulin. This is going to ruffle a few feathers, so please don't hate on me too much. I'm just telling you how the body works, and you should at least keep an open mind because this could open the gates to let you start burning fat like crazy. Look, I had a client not too long ago named Stacy. Stacy had insulin resistance. She did keto in order to reverse insulin resistance because she had read that that is what would happen. Now look, she did it the right way, okay? I'm sure I'm going to get comments about how she did it the wrong way. She did it the right way. And all that happened was it made her insulin resistance worse, and it caused her to store all of her fat around her tummy. Well, when I worked with Stacy, we changed her entire nutrition. She was eating a lot more carbohydrates, a lot more meals in the day, and what happened was it actually reversed her insulin resistance. We even lowered the fat, okay, we're going to talk about that today, and she lost all of the body fat around her belly and gained a tremendous amount of muscle. It was absolutely incredible, and she lost over 12 pounds of body fat in just 12 weeks. So what's going on with fat? Everyone says that it doesn't affect your insulin and you should eat more of it because it'll help with blood sugar and insulin. Well, the reason they're saying that is because it's low on the glycemic index. So if you look at fat and you look at the glycemic index tells you it's an index of foods and their impact on your blood sugar. The reason fat foods are not on that is because the glycemic index only measures your blood sugar over a 2-hour period. So what it looks at is if you have this food over 2 hours, how does that food affect your blood sugar? And they give that food ratings comparatively to straight glucose or insulin and what that would do to your blood sugar. So when people say something's high on the glycemic index, it means it has a big impact and it raises your blood sugar up a lot. Now there's also something called the glycemic load. This is even where some of the food combinations that I talk about come into play and why you shouldn't focus on calories, but you should focus on something called the food quadrant, where you're looking at not just what you're eating or how much, but also the combination of foods at each meal and the timing of certain foods through the day. Now, if you want to check that out, which you should, I'll put a little link up here to that video. It's very interesting, and this is why a lot of people can cut calories but not lose any weight, and sometimes they gain weight. So the glycemic load says if you take this food and this food, okay, now you've changed the whole glycemic index of the meal, of the meal. So this is important, but where does fat come into this? Well, fat doesn't show up because it doesn't spike your insulin until the 3-hour mark. So it doesn't show up on the glycemic index. Now, there's something else you can look up, and this is fun. Maybe I'll do a video on this if enough people ask me to. There's something called the insulin index. Insulin index. And this is how does a food affect your insulin? For example, if you just make a pure whey protein shake, drink that shake, nothing else in that, again, you're not combining the right foods, nothing else in that, that will actually spike your insulin. But protein is very low on the glycemic index, but it's very high on the insulin index. Well, there's a lot of fats that are also very high on the insulin index. It just doesn't get a lot of coverage, unfortunately. Now, when I was working with Stacy, she was wearing a continuous glucose monitor, and we watched if she had a fatty meal, this is what her blood sugar would look like. It would just start to spike over about 2.5 hours, and at the 3-hour mark, you would see a big peak. That's when the fat was getting broken down and cranking up her blood sugar and insulin. The difference between fats and carbs, though, and this is really important, carbs will spike your blood sugar relatively quickly, and then your blood sugar comes back down relatively quickly, unless you have some other issues going on. But fats will spike the blood sugar and keep it up because they're now digesting a little bit slower. They're breaking down more slowly. This is a problem because now your insulin is going to be being pushed out for a longer period of time. And this is one way that fats can cause insulin resistance. The other way is that some types of fats, and if you eat too much, especially too many fats all at once, can actually dull your muscles' insulin receptors and cause another form of insulin resistance. Now, I made a video all about that where I actually diagram how that works, and I'll put a little link right up here for that. You can watch that video too, and that shows exactly how fats affect your muscles' ability to interact with insulin, why that will prevent you from being able to tone your muscles, and how it can set you up to become insulin resistant as well. So are fats bad? Well, no food is bad. Well, trans fats maybe. But you know, natural, real occurring foods are not bad. I'm not saying you should cut fats out completely or do an ultra low fat diet. What I am trying to explain is fats right now are getting a really good publicity, and there's a lot of people overlooking certain things. Now, I find it very interesting that if we were having this conversation in the 1990s, all the doctors, all the experts would be saying how bad fat is. Now, all the doctors, all the experts are saying how good fat is. That's a 180-degree turn. The truth is somewhere in between there, so you have to just take that into consideration. So what do you do to fix this? Well, you want to lower your fat intake to some degree, especially at each meal. If you plug in too much fat all at once, look, that's not good. If you eat too much of anything all at once, that's not good. The body has a very hard time processing that. You want to be careful that you don't eat too much fat, and you need the right type of fat. Now, here's the other thing that most people don't talk about. There are 10 different types of fats that you and I would typically get in our diets, okay? You have trans fats. Those are pretty much all bad. You have saturated fats, and then you have unsaturated fats. Well, within the unsaturated fats, you have omega-9. You have 4 omega-6 and 3 omega-3. So that's the 10. And they all interact with your body differently. Saturated fats can have some harm. Now again, there's a new trend. Everyone's saying, no, saturated fats aren't bad. They don't cause heart disease and all this. Well, they may not be as bad as we once thought, but they do still have some negative repercussions, especially with insulin. All these omega-6 polyunsaturated fats that everyone thinks are so good. Well, a lot of those can cause inflammation, and they may not be so good either. They can cause some other things in the body like adrenaline spikes and increase something called prostaglandins, which are inflammatory markers. So those might not necessarily be all that good. Everyone says, oh, the omega-3s are all great. Well, to some degree, they're better than some of the other fats. But again, don't hear that you should just be able to eat unlimited of any of these. The body needs certain types in certain combinations to really create the right combinations. Even if you don't agree with that, you can send me negative comments, fine, whatever. I've been doing this 20 years. Through my experience, I can absolutely tell you what you eat, how much you eat at once, and the combination of what you're eating at that meal will absolutely create different chemical reactions in the body. It'll in fact impact your insulin differently. It'll impact glucagon differently. It'll impact fat-burning enzymes differently. It'll impact your thyroid differently, your liver, your digestion. It has so many different impacts. You just can't argue with that. You have to take everything into consideration. Now, there's another difference, and the difference is dietary fat versus stored fat. Okay, dietary fat is the fat you eat. Stored fat is the fat that's in your body, in your fat cells. And so a lot of times people will talk about burning fat. A ketogenic diet, for example, oh, it makes you burn fat. Well, the fat that a lot of times they're talking about is that it causes your body to burn and use dietary fat, the fat you put in, the fat you eat, which doesn't always translate into stored fat. So the dietary fats still spike your insulin. This is different than your stored fat. And to get to that stored fat, you absolutely need to regulate your insulin and use it in a way where it's going to help you burn fat. Now, in the last video, I talked about how insulin does deliver 2 specific fat-burning hormones and why insulin may not be a bad hormone. I'm actually going to throw the video link up at the end of this video on the video I did on how insulin can cause you to burn fat. And this is, again, very different than a lot of people have talked about or heard. Okay, now RMS, and this is the big thing. RMS stands for Repressed Metabolic Syndrome. And if you're not eating correctly and you're not eating enough, and to some degree, even if you're over-exercising, you will create something called repressed metabolic syndrome. Now, all that means, it's a fancy Harvard term. It means you repress your own metabolism. And so what happens is the wrong hormones and enzymes are present. When you eat something, it doesn't go into your muscles or your liver. It goes automatically into the fat cells. When you have RMS or repressed metabolic syndrome, the fat cells get kind of hung up, and it makes it hard for your body to use the stored fat. And this is why it's called repressed metabolic syndrome. You've repressed your metabolism. The body has a very hard time burning stored fat, but a very easy time storing food as fat. And I'm going to do a whole video about this, but if you're not eating enough or you're causing some of the wrong chemical reactions, this will shift your body into a fat storing mode. And then even if you reduce calories, even if you do low carb, even if you try to exercise more, you're going to have a very difficult time burning that fat. What will likely happen instead is you'll slow down your own metabolism. And if you've ever been there, and you know if you're watching this, if you're there, And over time, it gets harder and harder and harder to burn fat and lose weight. This is what's going on till sometimes it almost feels impossible. You're not broken, you can reverse this, and I'm going to do a video on that. But next video, I'm going to talk all about hormones. How do you fix your hormones? Can you balance them naturally without going and using hormone replacement therapy? And why do hormones shift all over the place in menopause to begin with? If you know these things, you can prevent that from happening, or you can heal it and fix those hormones so you start burning fat again. We're going to talk about that in the next video, so you'll want to tune in and watch that. Otherwise, I hope this was helpful. We'll talk soon. Take care.